It's time for week 8 of What Happened on My Universe mode! Raw was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we've had a lack of Divas action recently other than AJ Lee and Brie Bella, so we made up for it by having a tag match between the Funkadactyls and Summer Rae and Natalya. Obviously, as they teamed together regularly, the Funkadactyls were the team that was in charge, but occasionally, Natalya and Summer Rae would get a little hit in here and there. And then, they made the hot tag. And what did Natalya do as soon as the hot tag finished? She tagged back out. The match didn't last that much longer. Once Summer Rae had hit a couple of moves, Naomi knocked her off the top rope and Cameron hit a Mickie James DDT for the win. They don't have a end scene for the Diva tag teams, so this is the best you get. Next up, attention-seeking John Cena was out to seek attention against Seth Rollins. And he didn't get it all his way, just like last week.
For pure entertainment value.
Yes, as I said, he didn't have it all his own way again. In fact, at some points, like this powerbomb, you thought he was actually going to lose. But, alas, it's Super Cena, and eventually he'd get the upper hand again. And then he'd do something crazy like catch him like that, and do an FU and get the win. Ah well. Following that, Brie Bella attacked AJ Lee in the aisleway. Get used to that cutscene. You're going to be seeing it a lot tonight. Now, despite Brie Bella's attack, AJ Lee managed to get a bit of upper hand on here, and the match continued as normal. But once they were in the ring, she was able to hit a Bella Buster and get a victory. And when she'd finished, she came back in and continued the beating, getting ready for a pay-per-view match for Payback. Daniel Bryan was next, and he was supposed to take on R-Truth in a Falls Count Anywhere match, but Randy Orton said, "No, you're taking on me." And they had a Falls Count Anywhere match. But Daniel Bryan didn't really get much, because he was prepared for R-Truth. He wasn't prepared for Randy Orton, and Randy Orton would win with an RKO. It was main event time, and Brock Lesnar took on Kane in a submission match, but Kane was coming in all guns blazing and tried to tap him out in the first 5 seconds. He didn't, of course. This is Brock Lesnar. He ain't going to tap out like that. He tried a chokeslam, but that just pissed Brock off even more. Kane would have to go out of his way to get a win. And despite Brock Lesnar throwing him about, he would eventually lock on his, choke thingy. And, it says submit, but I think he passed out. Now, main event was in Chicago, and what better way to start than with Mr. Chicago himself, CM Punk. He took on Mr. Perfect. The two had a fairly open match, but the hometown hero would gain an advantage once he hit the springboard clothesline, and it's an advantage he wouldn't lose, hitting the elbow drop and the go to sleep, and taking the victory. Following that, another hometown hero, Lex Luger, was in the house. And last week he beat Santino with ease, so they gave him someone a bit more difficult this time, Rey Mysterio. He did find it a bit harder than last week, only getting a move eventually when he countered the Hurricane Rana into a powerbomb. He'd throw his weight about, hitting some power moves, and then knocking him out with the old forearm. Mysterio would try and get back into it, but it was no use. The pile driver gave him the victory. In match number 3, Ric Flair attacked Booker T in the aisleway. That's cutscene again, and then proceeded to smash him with chairs, as they had a Falls Count Anywhere match. Unfortunately for Booker T, he still has a bit of a dodgy leg after last week's attack, and Ric Flair exploited this, crushing his leg in the chair, before locking on the figure 4 leg lock and making him tap out once again. Post-match, Flair would continue the beating, throwing in another chair and smashing him a couple of times more. Next up, Shawn Michaels and Batista carried on their feud in a submission match.
In your house, Mind Games pay-per-view from wow, is it a brawl? Hey now!
Batista was the man on the offense this week. Shawn Michaels would get a couple of moves in, but this week it was the Batista show. He'd find a way of making something hurt, such as a powerbomb to the mats outside. The Monster was trying to get through the table, but it didn't let him. Shawn Michaels would get a bit of advantage in and get the super kick, but once he put a submission on, the figure 4 leg lock, Batista would turn it over, come out of it, and then put on the Beast Bite, whatever that is, and Shawn Michaels would tap out.
Does he have enough left to fight out? Oh, the longer he stays in this, the closer he is to losing the match. What a nasty hold that was.
In the main event, Triple H gave a rematch to Chris Jericho, who, like Kane on Raw, would come in like a house on fire, giving Triple H all kinds of beatings. Triple H would get a bit sick of it and try and trick him by going out the ring, but as soon as he was out the ring, he'd come back in thinking he'd get him, but he wouldn't. He just got a fist to the face and a code breaker, and Chris Jericho would pick up a victory over the game. The future was in Washington DC for NXT, and I may have mentioned a few weeks back at Bad Blood, I've unlocked the NXT title, so we're going to have a tournament, and this was our first quarter-final match, Finn Balor taking on Xavier Woods. Now this week's NXT may feel like one of those NXT specials on the WWE Network, because there are four contenders for Match of the Week, including this one, a wide open battle. But once Finn Balor had countered this submission move and hit his brainbuster, he took the win and advanced to the semi-finals of the NXT title tournament. Last week, Titus O'Neil took on Trevor from GTA 5. This week he'd give him a rematch in an Extreme Rules match, and Trevor dressed for the occasion. In fact, he went mental on him to start with.
O'Neil goes out of his way to inflict pain. Oh, lights out.
The match opened up a bit more around now when Trevor set a table on fire, but was then countered through it with a Russian leg sweep. He would try to keep Titus O'Neil down with a sleeper hold, but it was no use. Titus O'Neil would gain an advantage and not lose it, eventually finishing him off with the Clash of the Titus once again. In the third match of the show, Tim Vice's 3-match winning streak was put to the test as he took on Corey Graves in a submission match. Not only was this the third match of the show, it was also the third match on the show that was a contender for Match of the Week. It's not going to be Match of the Week, that's the fourth contender. The reason it was a contender for Match of the Week was because it was so wide open, you had no idea who was going to win. Corey Graves wasted his submission on the outside, because when they came back in, the Shizer Bomb was hit, and Tim Vicer locked on this move to make Corey Graves tap out. There's no Nemanja this week, as Rusev attacked Kevin Steen in the aisleway. That cutscene again. Kevin Steen would make a comeback once they made it back into the ring, and would almost get the victory, but Rusev would take it back outside, and then when they got back in, kick him in the face, and lock on the accolade for the tap out victory. After the match, we got that other cutscene that we see constantly, as Rusev attacks Steen. It's time now for the NXT main event, and our match of the week. Fit Finlay vs Bam Bam Bigelow in a submission match. It's as if we're starting a bunch of feuds or something. These two old WCW boys fought tooth and nail to try and get each other to tap out, both hitting their finishes and signatures, but neither would tap out straight away. The ending sequence came when Finlay put this submission on Bam Bam. He would be in it for a while, but he'd wriggle out. Finlay would then put it on him again. When he got out again and went for a move, the referee would get in the way. Finlay countered and locked in the submission once again for the win. As always, we end the week with SmackDown, and we were in Philly. We haven't had many tag matches this week, so let's have one here. The Usos took on The New Day, Kofi Kingston and Big E. As you'd expect, the Usos took the early advantage, but it wasn't long before Kofi Kingston would hit a couple of moves and tag in the fresher man, Big E. He hit his power moves, and then once they were done, the Usos would take advantage once again, hitting the Samoan drop and the Samoan splash. Take note though, it was Jey Uso getting the pinfall win, not losing streak Jimmy. Fandango's back! Unfortunately though, he's against the Big Show in his match back. Even when Fandango managed to counter something, Big Show would then smash him with whatever his counter was. Big Show threw him about and then put him out of his misery with a knockout punch. You ready for that cutscene again? Here it comes! Cesaro took out Dolph Ziggler on the ramp and then would destroy him with power moves. Random ones like this. Never seen that before. He'd get him back in the ring and hit him with a European uppercut and the neutralizer to take the win just before Payback in their big title rematch. Afterwards, there's this cutscene again. He beat him down some more. Next on the agenda, World Heavyweight Champion Mark Henry took on Alberto Del Rio in a continuation of their feud. Mark Henry took the early advantage, but Del Rio was getting his licks in too. Nothing was stopping either man, not even Mark Henry jumping off the second rope and landing on Alberto Del Rio with his 400-pound frame. Once both men had hit all their big moves, Mark Henry slapped on a World's Strongest Slam, but it wasn't for the win. Alberto Del Rio kicked out at 2. One swift enziguri later and Del Rio was locking on the cross arm breaker for what seemed like forever. He eventually would let go, but it was a mistake. Mark Henry's rubbery arms would hit a short arm clothesline and then he'd splash him, keeping him down for the 3 count. Post-match, Del Rio wanted to get a bit of revenge. He failed. Mark Henry would throw him over the top rope and celebrate. SmackDown's main event was yet another rematch between Luke Harper and Rowan and the Brotherhood. And, much like last week, it took the same formula. Goldust started off strong, but then Rowan and Harper would hold him down and keep him down with big power moves. Once Rowan and Harper's big moves were over, Goldust hit a curtain call and slapped Cody's hand for the hot tag. It was a pretty good hot tag, finishing it with a bulldog. He'd hit a back suplex and tagged Goldust back in. Goldust would get a boot to the face for his troubles, but eventually they'd hit their super double team move and be victorious once again. So, a couple of questions. Why does the game always use this bloody fucking cutscene? Oh, and can Kane win the WWE title at Payback? Find out next time on What Happened on My Universe Mode!